and Apple X are alive for a little bit. Epps gets a stun to save his own life by using that flashbang onto the Roadhog that hooked him, but it will not be for long, it looks like, as One Trick Wonders. He does it again, actually. What? What the f?
Rio Redemption is one of the oldest teams in League Zero history. They seem to be blessed with moderate to good performances during the regular season, only to be cursed with falling out of the postseason incredibly fast. It almost turned to a tradition at this point, despite that they did manage to make a name for themselves yet again this season, particularly off the back of a select few of incredibly talented players. They earned the praise and fanfare they got from the community, shouting in the chat of every match the famous slogan, "We represent." But how? How are they able to get out the playoffs so quickly? Well, in this episode of Season Review of Rio Redemption, we're going to be diving deep into that.
Rio picked up practically where it left off after Season 0, with the former captain Damian Death picking up the helm as manager. What distinguished Rio from the rest of the teams in Novice was not the coaches or their management in general, but rather the lack thereof. Damian had decided to forego appointing a captain or any official coaches, rather opting to lead the team all by his lonesome. It's reasonable to question his methods, however, despite the odds being stacked against him, Damian did manage to pick up a good amount of talent from the draft. Widely considered to be one of the better Novice main supports at the time, Damian was joined by the explosive potential of Stewie 1K on off-tank, Epps on DPS, and a few other familiar faces like Stanley and Tyranitar.
Rio had hit the ground running after the draft, scrimming quite a bit in preparation for their Week 1 opponents. Despite the fact that the Botburgers were considered the worst team in their division from the preseason power rankings, Rio made sure to be ready to make a statement in their seasonal debut. A clean 4-0, as some would call it, a complete massacre. Well, it was hard to determine how strong Rio truly was due to their opponents appearing so weak. Taking the top seed in Novice after the first match was the best way to start Season 1. Unfortunately, the win may have gone to their heads, because whatever the reason, Rio came into Week 2 considerably less prepared than before. The Pega friends absolutely dominated them, and as you might imagine for a team with so many big personalities, they did not take it very well. Blame was being shifted around, and there were plenty of targets to choose from. Rio hadn't been scrimming half as much as they did leading up to Week 1, and what's worse is that when they did practice, it was often without all of their starters. The main tank Werner in particular supposedly had little to no practice with the team going into the match against Papega. Plus it didn't help that the team didn't take too kindly to losing. While some were reacting internally, others took to the league's general chat to take part in some less than kind discourse with the rest of the community. The team couldn't go on like this. Unfortunately, they'd have to for the time being.
Week 3 brought about another difficult loss, this time to Double Cap, and while this one was a complete blowout, it arguably left the team in an even worse state. They once again took to playing the blame game. There was no clear answer for who was at fault. In their recollections of this time, much of the team feared that another loss in Week 4 would have resulted in the complete breakdown of Rio Redemption. Knowing that something had to change, Rio acquired Apple Expert and Chicken to bolster their already explosive frontline. These new pickups were exactly what the team needed to turn itself around, as they narrowly beat out One Trick Wonders' 5-map series. Despite the dire situation they found themselves in a few days prior, it started to seem like Rio finally found their footing. Apple Expert in particular was credited by many players as establishing a stronger comm structure, allowing for the improved team play as opposed to the individual carry playstyle Rio had been using up until this point. When games got dicey, they tend to fall back into this bad habit, but they were undeniably improving week over week. Rio finished out the first half of the season with a quick victory over Platchat. Not the most exciting way to enter the mid-season break, but beating a team everybody expected you to is always a good thing.
For the most part, Rio stayed relatively quiet during the break period. Their eternal benchwarmer Grapecake left the team during this time, and Werner was traded to One Trick Wonders for the flex support Ada. He was one of the major bright spots on the original OTW roster, so it was a solid pickup for the already stacked Rio lineup. Leading up to Week 6, you'd think that the team would feel reinvigorated to scrim even more with a solidified starting lineup and new talent needing to build up synergy. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Rio did little scrimming in preparation for the up-and-coming Botburgers, and as a result, were completely rolled over. The Botbusters returned the favor from Week 1 and absolutely annihilated Rio. It didn't help that many of their starters were unavailable for part or all of the game, but it was a hard loss regardless. It was at this point that something began to click within the team. According to the the players themselves, they began scrimming regularly again, and attempted to have fun despite the fierce competition. Whatever the cause may be, Rio won out the rest of the regular season, getting their own revenge on Papega Parrots in the process. Just shy of the coveted top 2 seeds, Rio would have to make do with 3rd. They wouldn't get their free pass into the semifinals, but their trip there was almost guaranteed, right? I mean, what had Platchat ever accomplished during Season 1 to make Rio worried? Overconfidence is a flimsy shield, and boy oh boy was Rio overconfident going into the playoffs. It's reasonable to say that they didn't have to prepare so hard for the absolute bottom-ranked team in Novice, the one that got their only regular season win from a waste disconnecting on double cap, giving them the 5v6 advantage. However, a little bit of scrimming beforehand probably wouldn't have hurt. Rio managed to take a single map off them, but ultimately Platchat rolled their way through to the semifinals match against Bot Burgers. With the star-studded roster they had, you could argue that Rio had a legitimate chance to go all the way, but just like Season 0, this squad had their playoff dreams crushed by the absolute bottom seed. Rio is an interesting team to look back on for Season 1. They undoubtedly had one of the highest peaks in all of Novice, but they were also one of the most volatile teams. Most of the community probably remembers how some of Rio's players would burst into general chat after a tough loss and just go ballistic because they didn't know how to handle defeat. One of the major aspects they were lacking, in the end, is composure. Rio steadily improved their teamwork over the course of the season thanks to the likes of Apple Expert and the other vocal leaders on the roster like Epps, who stepped up as captain later on in the season. Unfortunately, they couldn't ever truly shake the default of looking for solo carry plays when the going got tough. Above everything else, that was their fatal mistake. It's borderline impossible to beat a team on a hot streak without teamwork, as the league would soon find out after a few more rounds of playoffs. And while they didn't manage to break through the very precipice of success, they were arguably the second best team in Novice throughout the regular season, behind only the Bot Burgers. Maybe next season, if the team returns, they can finally break the curse of Rio and get past the preliminary rounds of playoffs, or at the very least not lose out due to underestimating their opponents. I mean, come on guys, seriously. B.